This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. I'm Kate, 27, and for most of my life, I've been living in the shadow of my older sister, Anna. She's always been the one who got everything: family's attention, praise, and all the financial support. Meanwhile, I've been the one doing everything right, working my hardest, but always getting overlooked. Anna's 30 now, married to Josh, 32, with 3 kids. They're always in the spotlight, always needing help, and the family has no issue bailing them out whenever they need it. I don't even have to ask. I just know that once things go wrong for Anna, my parents are going to step in and make everything better for her. But when it comes to me, I've had to earn everything on my own, even since high school. I always had to do more to get less. When I was a teenager, my parents were constantly comparing me to Anna. She was the golden child, the smart one, the one who could charm anyone into doing anything. Meanwhile, I was seen as the irresponsible one. I was always working harder, but it didn't matter. She was the star, and I was just there, a side character. But I didn't mind at first. I didn't realize how much it hurt until I started to see how the whole thing played out. When I graduated from college with a degree in computer science, with a 3.9 GPA, I thought maybe that would finally get me some recognition. But no, Anna graduated with a 3.2 GPA, and they threw her a huge party. When I graduated, we had lasagna at home with Mom. That was it. But that's when everything changed. After years of barely getting by, working my part-time jobs at the bookstore, and scraping together enough money to live on, I finally did it. I bought my own house. It wasn't big. It wasn't extravagant. It was a modest 2-bedroom cottage just outside the city. But it was mine. And I didn't tell anyone about it, not at first. I didn't want them to turn it into a problem. The last thing I wanted was for them to make it about Anna and her family. I knew if I told my parents or Anna, they'd start making suggestions about what I should do with the house, how I should make space for Anna's family, and how it could be the solution to all their problems. So, I kept it quiet. But of course, that didn't last long. Lisa, my coworker, just casually let it slip to someone, and before I knew it, my mother had called, all excited about helping me find a house. The next thing I knew, I was getting bombarded by listings from her, with the clear expectation that I would find a place big enough for Anna's family. I told myself I could handle this, that maybe I could find a way to play along. But deep down, I knew what was happening. They weren't interested in helping me find my dream home. They were interested in what they could get from it, what they could get from me. They didn't even try to pretend it was about me anymore. Every house they sent me was geared toward their needs. This one has a guest room for Mom and Dad. This one would be perfect for the kids. Oh, it's big enough for Josh to have his man cave. They made it clear, nothing, not even my home buying experience, would ever be about me. That's when I stopped responding. I muted the group chat, ignored their emails, and kept moving forward with my search, quietly. But then I found the perfect place. A small, quiet, 2-bedroom house that was just the right size for me. It had a small porch, a nice little backyard, and a kitchen with sunlight streaming in. It wasn't perfect, but it felt right. I knew it was mine the moment I stepped through the door. I put in the offer, and a few nerve-wracking days later, it was accepted. I was on top of the world, finally making a decision entirely on my own terms. But of course, I couldn't keep it to myself. I'd have to tell my family sooner or later. And that's when everything exploded. The night before dinner at my parents' house, I had already prepared myself for the inevitable. I knew they'd bring up the house again, but this time I had an answer for them. As I walked in, the kids were shouting, and the house felt loud and chaotic as usual. Anna was complaining about how hard it was to juggle 3 kids. I just nodded, waiting for the inevitable. Then, It came. My mom cleared her throat in that way she always did before delivering her big announcements. "Kate," she said, "we've been talking, and we think we found the perfect house for you." I almost choked on my water. This was it. The moment I knew was coming. I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, "What house?" "It's a beautiful house, just a few blocks away from us. 5 bedrooms, huge backyard for the kids." My mom continued, not noticing the way my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I couldn't take it anymore. "No," I said, setting my fork down. "I've already bought a house." The silence in the room was deafening. Anna's jaw practically hit the floor, and Mom's face turned red. "You bought a house?" Mom asked, her voice sharp. "Yes, a small 2-bedroom cottage," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "It's perfect for me." There was a brief moment of stunned silence before Anna, unable to hide her disbelief, asked, "A cottage? How are we supposed to fit in a cottage?" "You're not," I said coldly. "It's my house. I bought it for me." Mom couldn't hide her anger anymore. "Kate, how could you make such a decision without consulting us? We've been working so hard to find a place for you. You've been so selfish." I stood up, my chest tight with emotion. "I'm not selfish. I'm finally standing up for myself. And if that makes me the bad guy in your eyes, then so be it." And with that, I walked out of their house, not looking back. I was done. The next few days were chaos. My mother started a smear campaign online, posting pictures of my new house, trying to make me look ungrateful. Anna jumped in, playing the victim and telling everyone I was abandoning her children. I was bombarded with texts, calls, and comments from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone seemed to think I was the villain for wanting to be left alone, for wanting something of my own. But then, something even worse happened. One day, I came home to find Anna, Josh, and the kids in my house. They'd used the spare key my mother had kept from me to break in. They were making themselves at home, rearranging furniture, letting the kids run wild. That was the final straw. I called the cops immediately. Anna tried to argue that we were family, but the officers didn't care. They made them leave, and I felt this strange mix of anger and relief. But it didn't end there. The harassment continued. I installed security cameras, hired a lawyer, and filed a cease and desist letter against my family. I was done. But then, things took an unexpected turn. Anna came to my work, causing a scene, crying about how I was leaving her children homeless. She even brought the kids to my office, making a spectacle of it. That was when I had had enough. I knew I had to stand firm, not just for me, but for my own sanity. And so, I did. I cut them out. I stopped answering their calls. I blocked them from my social media. And while they continued to smear my name, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was my life, and I would live it on my terms. I spent the next few weeks trying to regain some sense of normalcy. I kept to myself and focused on my work, spending quiet evenings in my new house, something I had never been able to do before. I didn't have to constantly worry about being criticized or having my choices questioned. The peace I'd longed for was finally mine. Yet, as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something lingering in the air that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then, one evening, just as I was finishing dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my neighbor, a middle-aged woman who had always been kind to me. She was asking if everything was okay. At first, I was confused, but then I read her text more carefully. "Hey, I saw some strange cars in your driveway last night. Everything okay? It looked like someone was trying to peek inside your windows." My stomach dropped. Of course, I knew who it was. My mother, Anna. They couldn't stand the idea of me being independent, of having something for myself. I knew they'd never let it go. I immediately checked my security cameras and, to my horror, there were figures moving around my yard, clearly trying to get a look inside. But the worst part? One of them was my mother. She had been here, in my house, looking for any way to invade my space, to ruin the small, peaceful life I'd fought so hard to build. She had crossed every boundary I'd set. And now, they were coming for what was mine. I didn't waste any time. I called a locksmith and had the locks changed immediately, replacing everything: doors, windows, every single access point. I wasn't taking any chances. I also called my lawyer to update him. I couldn't let them get away with this, not after everything they'd already tried. The next day, as I was at work, my lawyer called me with some urgent news. My parents, along with Anna, had tried to gain access to my house again. They had come by when I was out, asking neighbors questions, trying to get inside. They were testing the waters. When I heard that, it became clear. My family was relentless. This wasn't about me being selfish. This was about control. And I had to make sure they couldn't manipulate me any longer. I made the decision to take more drastic measures. I filed for a restraining order against Anna, Josh, and my mother. The violation of my privacy and constant harassment needed to end. It wasn't just for me, but for my own peace of mind, my own future. I was done playing their game. As the days went by, the social media attacks continued. Anna posted photos of her family, trying to paint the image of the perfect, struggling family, pleading for sympathy. My mother continued to play the victim, claiming how heartbroken she was. They both were still trying to manipulate people into thinking I was the one who had abandoned them. The lies didn't stop. But I realized something important. Their words no longer affected me. For the first time, I wasn't looking for their approval. I had found my own voice. One day, I returned home to find a letter from my lawyer. It was an official cease and desist order for my parents and Anna, outlining their continuous harassment and attempting to invade my private life. It also warned them that any further actions would result in legal action. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. My family had become nothing more than a reminder of what I had escaped from: manipulation, guilt, and expectations. The next week, I had an unexpected visitor. It was Rebecca, my cousin, the one person I thought might understand what I was going through. She arrived at my door with tears in her eyes and a heavy heart. She had heard everything. She had seen how Anna and my mother had turned their lives into a battlefield, and she had finally realized the truth. "I'm so sorry," she said, as she walked inside, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have stood up for you. I should have seen what they were doing. But I was so afraid of getting caught up in the drama. I never wanted to be like them." We talked for hours, sharing everything. Her own struggles with Anna and the family, her regrets, and the realization that my choice to stand up for myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I didn't expect Rebecca to understand, but she did. It meant more to me than I could ever put into words. Maybe there was hope after all. Maybe family didn't just have to be blood. It could be about the people who truly supported you, the ones who saw you for who you were, not who they wanted you to be. Over the next few months, things began to calm down. Anna and Josh eventually stopped their attempts to manipulate the situation. They had no choice but to back off. The restraining order helped, but it was the boundary I had set that ultimately made them realize they couldn't just walk all over me anymore. My mother, however, didn't give up so easily. She tried to get through to me in every way she could, calling, sending emails, and even showing up at my door, pretending to apologize. But I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to play along anymore. If she couldn't respect my choices, I had no place for her in my life. I'm not saying it was easy. There were times when I felt guilty, when the weight of it all threatened to crush me. But I learned something important through it all. Boundaries aren't a form of punishment. They're a form of self-care. And when you finally decide to put yourself first, you discover a strength you never knew you had. Today, I sit in my little cottage, looking out at the garden I've been planting. I can finally breathe. I'm building the life I've always wanted. My house is just the way I've dreamed it. It's quiet. It's peaceful. And most importantly, it's mine. So, to anyone who's struggling with the same kind of family drama, I say this. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to put yourself first. No one should make you feel guilty for wanting a life of your own. And no matter what, always remember, family doesn't have to be toxic. Sometimes, the people who truly care are the ones who let you be yourself without judgment. After everything had settled, I found myself standing in the middle of my house, looking out at the garden I had carefully nurtured. The flowers I planted in the backyard were blooming, and for the first time, I felt at peace. The weight of the years of manipulation and resentment had lifted, and I was finally able to breathe deeply without looking over my shoulder. I had fought for my space, my peace, and my future. And I had won. But as much as I wanted to close this chapter and move on, I couldn't help but think about my family. The road I had taken wasn't easy, and as I looked back at everything that happened, I couldn't ignore the fact that it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the message I was sending. Standing up for myself had cost me the family I once thought I'd have forever. But was it really a loss? Or was it just an opportunity for me to finally define my own life without their suffocating influence? I couldn't help but think of Anna, how she'd manipulated the situation, using her children and her husband to get everything she wanted. She was still holding on to her old ways, still trying to get people to feel sorry for her, still trying to turn every situation into a drama that benefited her. My mother, too, remained distant, pretending to care, but only when it suited her, only when she could still twist my actions to make herself look like the victim. Their attempts to break me down had failed. But would they ever truly understand? Would they ever truly change? The worst part was how they seemed to believe they had the right to invade my life, to make my accomplishments about them, to make everything I did an opportunity for them to take something from me. Anna's blatant attempts to push me into giving her what was rightfully mine, my house, my space, left me disgusted. She couldn't even see how wrong she was. It was as though she thought family was a transaction, a way to get something out of people instead of a mutual respect. But in the end, it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I had fought hard for this life, and despite their manipulation, I had carved out my own space. They didn't have the power over me they once did, and I knew that, no matter how much they tried to push, I could never go back to being the person they wanted me to be. They could continue to live their lives with their drama and their guilt, but I had moved on. I had finally learned that the most important thing was to take care of myself, to recognize my own worth, even if no one else did. I stood by the window, staring out at the life I had built. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And that was more than I had ever expected. There was still work to be done, still progress to be made, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never again allow anyone to take away my happiness, my space, my right to live life on my own terms. As for my family, well, I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive them. but I've learned to let go of the anger. I'm focusing on the future. My future. What's done is done, and I'm not going to spend any more time looking back. The road ahead is mine to walk, and I'm going to keep moving forward. To everyone reading this who might be going through something similar, don't let anyone, no matter how close they are to you, dictate your worth. You are not responsible for their happiness. Set your boundaries, stand up for yourself, and walk away from anything or anyone who drags you down. Your life is yours to create, and you deserve to live it authentically, free from guilt and manipulation. I did it, and so can you. I'll leave you with this. Sometimes, the hardest part is not standing up to others, but standing up to the part of yourself that's afraid to let go. But once you do, the freedom you feel is unlike anything else. Thank you to everyone who has been with me on this journey. Your support has meant the world. And for anyone who is still struggling, remember, you are stronger than you think. Keep going. Now, it's your turn. Have you ever had to break away from someone or something that was holding you back? What did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going.